A nation without borders is not a nation. Beginning today, the United States of America gets back control of its borders.
On his first visit to the Department of Homeland Security, President Trump delivered on his signature campaign pledge.
We'll begin immediate construction of a border wall.
The executive order lays out the administration's plan to construct a physical wall along the shared border with Mexico. Add 5,000 Border Patrol agents to the 17,000 already policing it, and build detention facilities to jail those who illegally cross it.
The day is over when they can stay in our country and wreak havoc.
Well, Mexico's President Enrique Pena Nieto has wasted no time in condemning the move to build the wall.
50 Mexican consulates in the United States have become real human rights defenders. Our communities are not alone. The Mexican government will give legal advice and guarantee the protection needed. I regret and disapprove of the decision by the United States to continue with the construction of the wall from a long way back. Far from uniting us, it is dividing us. Mexico does not believe in walls. I have said time and time again, Mexico will not pay for the wall.
The Trump wall is only part of the president's plan to crack down on illegal immigration. Correspondent William LaJeunesse spent the last few days along our southern border and tells us tonight about some of the other Trump policies that could make a big difference.
Stemming the flow of illegal immigrants is one challenge. Dealing with those already here is another.
The anger and just the devastation of that day is something I relive.
Steve Ronnebeck lost his son after petty criminal Apollo Altamirano shot Grant at a convenience store shortly after being released by ICE as a low-priority detainee. Well, Trump today ended that Obama policy of prosecutorial discretion and brought back a Bush-era program that identifies all criminal aliens while still in jail to avoid the costly effort of tracking them down as fugitives.
My first takeaway is, wow, he is sending a very strong message that he is serious about what he was saying on the campaign trail going back a year and a half.
Talk about a transformation. President Trump's expected to sign an executive order pausing visas from 7 countries considered to be terror hotspots that are on the screen right now. Plus, the Syrian refugee program will be halted.
It's a step in the right direction. For example, the European countries have a very large and growing Muslim population, and it's a serious threat as well. There are a lot of terror bases there. There are a lot of groups that are developing terror strategies in places like Belgium and France and England as well. So they're all aiming to launch terrorist attacks.
German government and the Federal Criminal Police Office have issued a warning that terrorists could carry out a chemical weapons attack.
Well, it's a very detailed report that's been put out by the German Federal Police, backed up by the government here in Berlin. It looks into potential scenarios in which a chemical attack could be carried out on German soil by a terrorist group. And it goes into quite a lot of detail, particularly when it outlines scenarios in which the federal police and other security services deem to be potential targets. We're looking at things here like drinking water to apartment buildings being poisoned, also food sources being poisoned, the transport and storage of major and large amounts of chemicals being attacked, or even an explosive device packed with some kind of chemical substance being detonated at a public event or in the street at large. As I said, very detailed report. It is being taken incredibly seriously here in Germany, and that's because of the scale of the chemical industry here. And they're looking in this report at just who could get a hold of these chemicals, and the main culprits, the main potential culprits could be, in the eyes of the German Federal Police, Islamic terrorist groups. It's they who they've labelled as the most committed and have the most potential ability to be able to try and get a hold of chemicals in the country that they could use to carry out such an attack.
Donald Trump has promised to dispatch federal authorities to Chicago if the city doesn't do more to address violent crime. The president said on Twitter Tuesday night, if Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, I will send in the feds. Trump cites numbers that appear to come from a recent Chicago Tribune report on violence in the city. January has been the deadliest start to a year in Chicago in decades, with over 220 shootings and 40-plus homicides. The thing is, federal authorities already work with local officials to fight crime in Chicago, and Trump's pledge to send in federal aid might actually be welcomed with open arms. Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel asked Trump in a meeting last month for federal assistance for mentoring programs and police hiring. And on Tuesday, Emanuel told local station WTTW he would love more help from the federal government with gun control, prosecution for gun crimes, and more funding for police officers.
Over the years, the federal government stepped back their resources, which we have stepped up on. The federal government can be a partner, to be honest. They haven't been over for decades.
2016 was one of the bloodiest years for Chicago since the 1990s. Police said there were 762 murders, 3,550 shooting incidents, and 4,331 shooting victims last year.
Many people voted for Trump just because of their worry of what damage a more liberal Supreme Court could do in years ahead.
People were particularly sick of liberal judicial activism.
The president says he will announce his Supreme Court pick 1 week from tomorrow. He tweeted out his intentions this morning.
We have outstanding candidates, and we will pick a truly great Supreme Court justice.
The leading candidates are 3 federal judges who are all strong conservatives. A top contender right now, Neil Gorsuch, who is known as a judge in the mold of Scalia, interpreting the Constitution and laws based on their original meaning. Also on the shortlist, William Pryor, who once called the Roe v. Wade decision legalizing abortion an abomination. And Thomas Hardiman, known for his support of gun rights.
Pro-life Americans are among the happiest with Donald Trump's victory. He has made a lot of promises, and this week he already delivered, cutting off funding for abortion groups overseas. Now, pro-life organizations and politicians are ready to push hard for more progress on a number of anti-abortion fronts.
We are poised to make great gains for the movement.
Republicans in the last Congress knew if they could get any kind of pro-life measure through there, it'd surely be vetoed by President Obama. But it's a whole new ballgame now with a President Trump.
He is pro-life. He has stood up, defended pro-life. And of course, Mike Pence, our VP-elect, has a wonderful pro-life record.
We were facing an existential threat to the unborn had Hillary Clinton won. Barack Obama was the abortion president, but she would have doubled down and made it even worse domestically and internationally. So we've gotten a reprieve of sorts in terms of this all-out assault.
The Netherlands is setting up an abortion fund to counteract U.S. President Donald Trump's recent ban of U.S. aid for abortion services overseas. Dutch Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Coordination, Liliane Ploumen, announced the plan Wednesday, January 25th, after Trump's executive order. Known as the Mexico City Policy, it bans U.S. funding for international aid groups that advocate for access to abortions. The ban still applies even if a group doesn't perform the procedure. If they even provide information about abortions, their funding is pulled. Ploumen said the Dutch fund, which will be financed by a coalition of governments and foundations, will help make up for the loss in U.S. funding.
Chili's restaurants in Indiana and Kentucky have joined with Planned Parenthood to raise funds for the organization, which provides sexual and reproductive health services to those who might otherwise be unable to afford it. Customers looking to give back while dining out can pick up a voucher at Planned Parenthood and present it to their waiter when they order. Chili's will then donate 15% of the bill to Planned Parenthood.
The State Department is now reviewing the Obama administration's last-minute $221 million transfer of money to the Palestinians. Now, the department could make adjustments to that payment to make sure the money complies with President Trump's priorities. Congress was notified about the money just hours before President Obama left office. Those funds had been blocked by Republican lawmakers over concerns the Palestinians made to seek membership in international organizations and also concerns about where all the money would end up.
Resistance to Donald Trump has been on the rise following his inauguration, with part of the protest movement morphing into an uprising with calls for a revolt.
The revolution starts here.
Revolution! We want a revolution! Donald
Donald Trump's election was unlike anything we'd seen before. But one outlet, Politico, looked at the events surrounding the election and wrote a satirical piece pointing to similarities with the Arab Spring. On the surface, they may have a point, even if made in jest. In both worlds, we saw mass protests against someone seen by the opposition as a dictator, or in Trump's case, a would-be dictator.
I have described him as an imposter and con man and a would-be dictator.
Demonstrations turning violent, with agitated youth smashing windows and setting things on fire.
As an exercise in free speech and as an exercise in sort of, nonviolent dissent.
It's great to see activism reborn, if you will, in a way that we haven't seen.
It was the revolution they said could never happen.
They're back out on the streets of Cairo, calling for those political reforms and freedoms.
And all of this against the backdrop of a divided country, along religious sectarian lines in the Arab world and political ones in America. One big difference, however. People in the Arab world protested against old regimes and for a right to elect a new government. In America, the protests were against the democratically elected president who just took office.
The German Justice Ministry has decided to get rid of an old law that prohibited citizens from criticizing foreign leaders, and the timing is probably not a coincidence. The move comes less than a week into Donald Trump's presidency and the same day that Germany's justice minister posted a tweet criticizing Trump's immigration policy. Germany does have free speech laws, but it also has an archaic 19th century clause on the books that forbids its citizens from criticizing foreign heads of state.
The British Prime Minister Theresa May has promised she'll now set out her plans for Brexit in a white paper, as demanded by opposing members of Parliament. And that sparked extremely heated debate with Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition Labour Party.
I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published this month.
Could we know when this white paper is going to be available to us? And why it's taken so long to get it? Prime Minister!
We're focusing on a truly global Britain.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, is threatening the EU that unless they give in to her demands, she will turn Britain into a bargain basement tax haven off the coast of Europe.
The process of leaving the EU was initiated back in June last year, after Britain voted in a referendum. To make it happen, the government has to invoke Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which says that any member of the Union has a right to leave. There is then a 2-year period to agree on the terms of departure. However, 7 months on from the referendum, and Brexit could potentially be held up in Parliament indefinitely.
The Italians living in absolute poverty rose from 1.8 million in 2007, the year that marked the beginning of the financial crisis worldwide, to 4.6 million last year, equaling almost 8% of the population in the country. That makes a 155% poverty increase in a span of 10 years. The figures have been recently released by the Italian Conference of Bishops. Consecutive governments, the conference has argued, have failed to deal with Italy's growing poverty levels in the past decade.
What is most striking here is that for years no government has ever adopted serious income redistribution policies. Social equality has been totally forgotten in our country. The need for austerity measures has been simply an excuse to make inequalities even bigger. That's why we have more poor than ever today.
France's December job data is out, and 30,000 more people are out of a job. For all of 2016, joblessness remained nearly unchanged and near the record high. Unemployment is the main reason François Hollande will not even attempt re-election, a historically rare decision for an incumbent president in the West.
The main problem in our country is unemployment. Either people don't have jobs, or they don't have well-paying jobs, or they are underemployed, or they live in regions where jobs have left. We need to try a different course with our economic policy.
Why has Hollande's policy, designed by technocrats and specialists, been unable to succeed? Hollande handed hundreds of billions of euros in tax cuts to corporations, but there were no strings attached in the form of forcing them to hire people. This taxpayer money was simply pocketed by rich businesses and only helped France to produce a European record for shareholder dividends in 2014.
U.S. federal debt is expected to grow by nearly $10 trillion over the next 10 years, according to projections released Tuesday, January 24th by the Congressional Budget Office. The main driver of debt will be rising Medicare and Social Security costs for an ever-growing group of seniors, the baby boomers. That, coupled with interest payments on the debt and only moderate revenue growth, the federal deficit could rise to historic levels over the next decade. The CBO doesn't take into account the proposed policies of President Donald Trump. Its predictions are based off the current state of the economy and laws that are currently in place.
A group of scientists from India want to investigate if the 2015 Nepal earthquake resulted in the shrinking of Mount Everest, as satellite data suggests. The country's Surveyor General, Swarna Subbarao, said Everest was last measured in 1955 by the Indian government. That survey, more than a half-century ago, recorded the height of the world's tallest mountain as 8,848 meters, or 29,029 feet. Following the 7.8 magnitude quake in Nepal, Rao believes the mountain may have dropped by as much as a meter. He intends to send a team of about 30 scientists and surveyors to take exact measurements and determine the mountain's current height.
A pipeline spill in Western Canada leaks more than 52,000 gallons of oil into an Aboriginal community. The provincial government in Saskatchewan said it was notified of the spill on Friday, January 20th. Doug McKnight, an official with the Canadian Ministry of the Economy, reported that as of Tuesday, nearly 45,000 gallons had been recovered. The spill comes just 7 months after another similar incident in the same province. The Husky Energy Pipeline leaked more than 59,000 gallons into a major river in July and cut off drinking water for 2 cities. McKnight said officials are still working to determine what led to this most recent spill. The oil leaked onto the lands of the Oceanman First Nation, which sits 87 miles southeast of the provincial capital of Regina. 540 people live in Oceanman. A resident had reportedly smelled the oil for about a week before alerting authorities.
A massive hole opened up in the ground in Pennsylvania, threatening to swallow homes around it. Part of a road, the sidewalk, and a tree already fell in, and a pickup truck dangles on the edge. The sinkhole opened in a residential neighborhood outside Philadelphia overnight. And right now, crews are pumping cement into the ground, trying to secure the area. The edge of that hole goes right up to 2 homes, forcing those families to evacuate.
They did hear a loud noise this morning. She said sounded almost like an explosion, and that's what woke them up.
Once we begin to pump concrete into the hole, we're going to get a sense of how deep it is, how big it is, and how quickly we can start to stabilize this even more.
Thankfully, no injuries have been reported.
A new study reports overuse of antibiotics triggered a severe diarrhea outbreak in British hospitals that began in 2006. Researchers analyzed hospital data related to the outbreak of Clostridium difficile, a superbug gut infection. The investigators concluded that reducing the use of antibiotics such as Cipro and Levaquin curbed the outbreak. Co-author of the study, Derek Crook, said these findings are of international importance because other regions, such as North America, where fluoroquinolone prescribing remains unrestricted, still suffer from epidemic numbers of C. difficile infections. Crook is a professor of microbiology at the University of Oxford in England.
We all know Russia's President Vladimir Putin likes posing with tigers, especially tiger cubs and matching tiger print beds. He also likes shirtless strolls with a rifle, with a camera crew in tow, presumably hunting something down. And of course, your Vlad famously loves shedding his shirt for a countryside horse ride. But today a whole new thing. He's a singer.
Далеких планет останутся наши следы. На пыльных тропинках далеких планет останутся наши следы.
Now everything's fine. Turns out Putin was singing for a group of students. We're told that's a Soviet-era song about space race.
Beijing has warned the new U.S. administration to stay out of the territorial dispute in the South China Sea. It's what's seen as a rare move. A senior Chinese foreign ministry official spoke to the U.S. media to deliver Beijing's message to Donald Trump.
There might be difference or controversial claims over the sovereignty over those islands, but that's not for the United States.
He claims he's not a hero, but this self-described ordinary man carried out an extraordinary deed. While driving on I-10 in Arizona, Thomas Yoxall spotted a law enforcement officer under attack. The DPS trooper Ed Anderson had stopped to investigate a rollover crash. When the officer approached the overturned vehicle, he discovered Leonard Penuelas Escobar cradling a woman. As the trooper came closer, Penuelas shot him with a pistol. Penuelas then attacked the injured trooper, savagely beating Anderson. When the passing-by Yoxall noticed the attack unfold, he stopped to help. He pleaded with the assailant to stop, but he refused. Yoxall says there was no choice or chance to think about it rationally, so he responded. Firing 2 shots, Yoxall killed the suspect. Despite his heroic actions, saving Trooper Anderson's life, Yoxall says he doesn't consider himself a hero at all. But Yoxall is still coping with the other side of his actions, taking another man's life. I did save somebody's life that morning, said Yoxall, but I had to take somebody else's life in the process, and that's difficult to reconcile. Yoxall says he feels God put him on that dark stretch of freeway for a purpose. Doing the right thing sometimes has prices, and that price is severe, Yoxall said. But I wouldn't change it, because another man got to go home to his family, and his family gets to keep him a little longer. Trooper Anderson is still recovering from his injuries and will need more surgeries in the future, but is said to be in good spirits. For Fox News, I'm Rob Demetrius.